Welcome everybody to Animal Chat Time with Eels. Eel Nose has an excellent picture if you want to see that. It is a seal with an eel up its nose. It rhymes, it's fantastic, it's freaking me out. So eels are super amazing. When I started researching them, I thought, oh, eels are kind of cool. As it turns out, eels are very cool and very diverse. So all eels are long fish, but not all lungfish are eels. This is going to be important for later. We're going to work it out. I'm going to explain the difference. Now, they are fish for a number of reasons. They live in the ocean. They have gills. They have bones. Sharks are interesting because they're also fish, but they don't have bones. They have cartilage. So things in the ocean evolve crazy, y'all. There are 800 different species of eel, but there's actually only 400 species of true eel. We're going to get into that because, again, an eel is a long fish. There's lots of long fish out there, but true eels, there's only 400. The smallest eel is 5 centimeters, which is about 2 inches, and it's the one-jawed eel. And the biggest eel is 4 meters, which is 13 feet, and that's the slender but giant moray eel. Adult eels weigh anything between 30 grams, which is about like 1 ounce, little tiny babies, baby adults. And then the really big fellas can be 25 kilograms, which is 55 pounds. So they are, and those are adults. I'm going to also talk about the life cycle of eels because for a really long time, we thought we didn't know where eels came from because we didn't realize that baby eels were baby eels. We thought they were totally different species, which is pretty neat. So as Daniel pointed out this morning when he sent me a message, eels are super good at swimming. They're not particularly fast, but they're very, very strong. The kind of fastest-ish eel is the American eel, and it travels 2.4 miles an hour, which is about 3.9 kilometers an hour, which, to be fair, is faster than I swim. So good work, little eel, big eel. And how they swim is actually really interesting. They don't have pectoral fins, and they don't have side fins. They are a long ribbon shape, long fish, and they move by generating waves in their body. So the eel dance is really easy to do. You just kind of wave like an eel doing that thing. Pretty cool. Now they can also swim backwards, which is pretty neat. And how they do it is they just go backwards. So if they want to go forward, they ribbon this way, backwards, ribbon in reverse, which is pretty smart. Most eels, so this is adult eels, live in shallow waters. Some live in the ocean, some live in fresh water. Diverse. They are very diverse fish. Many of them burrow into sand or mud, but they generally live amongst rocks. They really like to be really cozy in rocky mud situations. Oh, I see a unicorn. Excellent. There's quite often eels will hang out together in deep holes or cracks, and they're called eel pits, which is quite neat. There's some species of eels that live together in on the continental shelf in deep slopes down 4,000 meters or 1,300 feet. So sometimes they're in shallow water, sometimes they are real low. The heaviest eel on Earth is the European conger. The maximum size of this eel was 3 meters, which is 10 feet. So it's pretty big, but a bit large because it weighed 110 kilograms, which is 240 pounds. So it is chonky, big friend. Conger, chonky guy. The longest eel ever recorded was the slender giant moray eel. It was captured in 1927, and get this, y'all, it was 12.9 feet, which is 3.9 meters, which is about as tall as an elephant. So that was not getting stuck in any seal's noses. Much too big. So the difference between true eels and lungfish is a little slippery. So a true eel has 1 dorsal fin. From its neck all the way to its butt, essentially. So just one long ribbon. When I show you pictures, it will make more sense. But if you look at the dorsal fin of like a shark, that is, or a whale, it's just like, you know, the dorsal fin. You know, it looks very much, very pointy, very triangular. This goes all the way down its little ribbon body. The other important thing about true eels is they generally live in, depending on the eel, they live in fresh water, but they breed in the ocean, which is kind of interesting. There are many eels that live in the ocean, and they breed in the ocean, they live in the ocean the whole time, but many eels, if it's a true eel that's a freshwater eel, it still goes to the ocean to breed and to be born, essentially. They have tiny little scales or skin. So it's not like a true fish will have scales on it. But because they are ribbon shaped and they're so good at swimming, they are very smooth, which is important. They're called slippery as an eel because generally most eels do produce slime. So moray eels look like they're a bright green. Moray eels are actually brown, but the slime, the mucus they have all over them, is actually yellow. So it looks like they are bright green because all their sliminess. Delightful. Eels who are baby eels, larvae eels, are little ribbon-like creatures. We'll talk a little bit more about them later, but we used to think that they were just different types of fish. For a really long time, we just thought eels like appeared in the ocean. The ocean, like we said before, we don't really know what sea turtles do with their time. We don't know what narwhals do with their time because the ocean is so big and these animals can just hide and we don't know where they're going, what they're doing. And so it took us a really long time to know, oh, these aren't little larva things in the air. These aren't little baby eels. They are baby eels. They're not different fish. They're baby eels, little larvae that are going to eventually grow to be big friends. And they have numerous sharp teeth. So eels have big chompers. Freshwater eels are often they're in Canada, in America, all through many countries actually. And like I said before, they always go to the ocean to breed. Now, so this is important because the electric eel is not actually an eel. It's just a long fish. So it should be the electric longfish. Oh, that's a lot of words. So the electric eel, we know it's not an eel because it stays its whole life in fresh water. A true eel will go to salt water for a while. It doesn't have any teeth, and eels have to have chompers. It doesn't actually have a dorsal fin. It's closer related to a catfish rather than an actual eel. So while we think it's long and slippery, it is slippery. It's not slippery enough. It's long enough. Its dorsal fin is not long enough, and it doesn't have chompers. So electric lungfish. Also, electric eels are air breathers, which is pretty cool. They don't have gills. And so they breathe the water because they live in really oxygen poor water in the Amazon basin. And everything's like really murky and really muddy there. Now, kind of like a cool thing about electric non-eels is because they live in muddy waters, they are mostly blind. And so what they do is they rely on low-level electrical pulses to navigate. So they're electric, and what they do is they kind of use sonar. They have electrical pulses that go out and they're able to see if there's prey around and also if like the side of the bank is there and they should turn. They use higher levels of voltage to stun prey and then eat them. So they're actually really interesting. I mean, for non-eels, they're pretty interesting. So moray eels, back to real eels. They have smooth skin. They don't actually have scales. They are covered in this slippery mucus goo, which is toxic. So it's one of the ways they protect themselves against bigger predators. Now, what is really cool about the moray eel is they have a pharyngeal jaw. And I'm gonna show you a picture of this later, and it is weird and cool. I'm gonna explain what it is in a little bit. I'm gonna Yeah, that will make more sense. Now, because when you think of an eel, you typically think of like quite a big head, and you might have seen little circles behind their ears. They look, or behind where their ears would be. They look like they would be ears, or maybe they're like cute little dimples. What they actually are is a circular gill. Now, they don't have gill coverings, and so they don't have anything that will pump the water through their gill so they can breathe. So what they need to do is they open their mouth. And so that's why you see eels with their mouth open all the time, because they're pumping water through their mouth, through their gills. And so they're not just like waiting for a punchline at the end of the joke. They're actually breathing that way, which is pretty neat. Now, like I said before, most eels do live in salt water, but then some travel from salt water to fresh water. Now, a really cool example of this is a European eel, and it's neat because it goes 3,000 miles or 4,800 kilometers from freshwater where it lives to salt water, so it can spawn, it can lay eggs. And so that is very, very far. And if you think about that, that also means babies have to travel very, very far. Now, the babies are born in the Atlantic Ocean, and then they have to go back into Europe, essentially. The journey takes about 2 or 3 years, and baby eels are called glass eels because they are transparent, which is pretty neat. Now, European eels are a little bit different from other eels because they do have pectoral fins, but they're quite little. So you know, all those things that I said about eels, they have to have this. Unless you're this type of eel, then who knows? Now, so when baby eels are born, they're born as eggs. A mom eel can lay about 4 million buoyant eggs. So she lays the eggs and they float along the surface, which is pretty neat. And they just kind of like, they hang out. This is what they do. It's why we didn't know a lot about eels, because there's just eels hanging out. They drift around the sea for about 7 months. Between 7 months and 3 years. We actually don't know how long it takes. And then they become little glass eels. They're little larvae. And then they grow up a little bit more. And when they're not larvae anymore, they start to go into the freshwater system. And so they start to get pigmentation. They start eating more and more things that are going to make them look like eels and not glass eels anymore. And they're called elvers. I think it's really cute. And then for the next 6 to 20 years, they just put on weight. They look more eely. They do their thing. They go from a yellow eel to a silver eel. And when they become a silver eel, they are totally mature and they can go back to the sea and lay more eggs. So they have this really interesting life cycle that they hang out in fresh water, they leave the fresh water, and then the babies go through the fresh water again. They are amazing swimmers. And of course they have to be. They go from the ocean. They're going against all the, as babies, they're going against all the rivers. They can go, so they go against the tides and the streams and the currents. And they can go up dams, up weirs. They are, again, not fast swimmers, but they are super, super strong, which is really, really neat. Much of their life cycle, though, is kind of a mystery because they're so little and they are, you know, glass eels. We can't really see them. They're very difficult to study. So we know that they're just like baby sea turtles, right? We know that they're around, but we don't really know exactly what they're doing. Now, the other kind of cool thing, which is why I said sheep and eels are kind of related, is European eels are such strong swimmers. They can, like I said, they can swim upstream, they go up dams, up weirs. They also can get out of the water if they see something they like a delicious slug, and they can go into a field and eat something there, which is weird. So the longest, the furthest that they can get is 400 meters. So that's all the way around an Olympic track. That is how far this water-based animal can flop, because it's just going through a farmer's field, eating some slugs, things like that, which is pretty neat, pretty cool. So that's 1,300 feet. Sorry, if you are in feet.
How long? What type of eel could do that again?
That is the European eel. But there's quite a few eels in North America that can also do that. They can't go quite as far, but they're pretty good at like slopping around in kind of muddy areas and then getting back to the water. They have the really cool part of them not having scales and having skin is they can absorb oxygen through their skin. And so as long as they are a little bit moist, then they are totally fine. They can breathe that way. Now, the pharyngeal jaw, let me explain to you moray eels before I show you some pictures of them. Now, most fish, how they eat is they open up their mouth and it creates negative space and they can suck fish in that way, littler fish in or their prey, which is pretty neat. Now, moray eels can't really do this because they're always opening their mouth to breathe. They don't create that negative space. So they have this pharyngeal jaw, which means they have two jaws. So their mouth opens, and then they have a secondary jaw with some teeth in it. It opens as well. Now, it doesn't create that negative pressure. The jaws open, and when they go to bite, the jaws will spring forward and spring back, which is pretty neat and cool to think about. So they don't have pectoral fins. They don't have little hands. They can't grab things. They can't really do a lot. They have to eat with their faces. And so they evolved in this amazing way that they have the secondary jaw that will grab the crab or the octopus or the urchin or whatever they're trying to eat and will go right into their mouth, which I think is amazing of them. Eels are omnivores, so they eat lots of things, but they eat a lot of carrion, like I said, slugs on land, but then they'll also eat crabs and fish and you know, anything that comes to them. So let's see some pictures because they are cool. And okay, so this is a moray eel. This is actually 3 moray eels, but you can see its little, it's circular gill. So that's not actually an ear. When I saw this, I actually had to Google, do eels have ears? What is this? So you can see that they have this the circular gill. You can see how long their dorsal fin goes. It actually doesn't even look like a dorsal fin. It's just part of their body. I guess a dorsal fin always is. And you can see that they live in these rocks and these cracks, and they live with all their buddies, which is pretty neat. Look how handsome they are. Oh, hi. They also have an excellent sense of smell because they do like eating meat. They have to smell everything in the ocean to see where the meat is. And so you can see the front of their nose, they have 2 little like outward nostrils, which is, oh, well, we'll go back 1 second. And they're absolutely beautiful. Look how great this long fish that is an eel is. Here's another eel. Again, you can see how long and beautiful its dorsal fin is. You can see that it's trying to breathe right now because its mouth is open and it's not, its pharyngeal jaw is not out. And you can see its circular gill working, which is pretty beautiful. This is a little, these are little spotted garden eels, and you can see they're very, very little. They like hanging on the bottom, and they eat a lot of carrion. So things that come by, they don't do a lot of hunting themselves. When little pieces of meat and things come by, they just scoop it up. They just use that negative space that other fish do. They are very cute. And here is a beautiful picture of a full eel. So you can see that it does look very ribbony, quite long. It is also very camouflaged, just like everything in the ocean and on land and in the sky. Camouflage is super important so bigger animals don't find it and eat it. And then here's the greatest thing on the internet. This explains the pharyngeal jaw in a song. When the jaws open wide and there's more jaws inside, that's the moray. So this is a moray eel, and you're welcome. So you can see how amazing this is because they do have 2 separate jaws. And so when they're just breathing, their pharyngeal jaw just hangs back They don't need it. But when they go to hunt something, the jaw will come forward, clamp on, like, let's say a crab, clamps on the crab, and then they can put it back into their mouth and start digesting, which is, I think, amazing. What a cool animal. It knows how to eat. I like anything that is really good at eating. Okay, so let's get to some questions.
The first question is, how long do eels live?
It's a good question. So because there are so many different types of eels, there is a huge diversity. Most eels, though, live to be about 30. Some eels can live into the 80s. I know that we had a question, someone wrote in and they asked if eels can live under ice. Now, like every animal that lives in cold water, they have a really low metabolism, so they tend to live longer. And so eels can live under ice. They generally go into something that's close to a torpor or hibernation, that their hearts beat really, really slowly. And so they don't do a lot of hunting. They just kind of like take a nap under the ice. But those cold water eels can live to be about 80. Most eels about 30.
Do eels eat people, Nora?
No, that is also a good question, because that pharyngeal jaw can look scary. But yeah. No. Eels they do not want to hang out with people, because humans are generally, other than really big eel we heard about, they don't want to hunt people because they are way smaller than us, and they just they prefer to eat things like crabs and urchin and octopus, and I assume we taste very different. So they like to look at us and go, nah.
How do they go past the really strong currents?
And slide past and go on land to breathe.
Yeah. So because they are covered in skin rather than scales, they're very hydrodynamic. And so it makes them, and their whole body is like, many different muscles, but because they swim like a ribbon, it works together. So because they're hydrodynamic, instead of pushing against the water, they're kind of like sliding through the water. So it's the difference. If we were swimming and we put our hands in front of us and we dive in, it feels a lot better than if we kind of like flail around in the water. Same thing with eels. They're super good because they can use all of their body to whoop, whoop, whoop. And it's also why they like being in rocks so much. They love being in caves and rocks because there's less current there, and they can finally rest.
I'm wondering what's the deadliest eel on Earth?
The deadliest eel on Earth. I would actually say the moray eel is the best hunter on Earth, because evolution has given them this pharyngeal jaw. They are quite big. They the slime that they have, the mucus, is toxic, and so they're really good hunters. And if things try to eat them, they can get poisoned. And then because they also eat carrion, they eat dead animals as well as hunting. If they get in a fight and that animal dies, they go, "Excellent, that's my lunch. You're welcome." So I would say they are the best hunters, moray eels. They also have really big chompers.
How do electric eels get charged up?
Electric eels, cool. So they actually don't need to charge themselves, which is pretty neat. So in your body right now, every time you move, there's small electrical currents that, like, you don't feel because that's just your body. And then because we haven't evolved in a way that we can get all of our muscles to put all the electricity together, we can't zap people, which I think is probably good. But electrical eels have evolved in this really cool way to survive in the Amazon basin. They have sort of realized for millions of years that all of the movement in their body, all the electricity, can actually be used for their sonar and can be used to hunt other things. Typically the way that they hunt is something touches them, and then they kind of twitch, and that twitch gets the energy and electricity out. So they're not like zapping in sort of like superhero way. It's sort of like a defense mechanism that then they started using for eating. So it's a good question. They don't actually need to charge. They have the power inside them all the time.
I was thinking, do some eels eat each other?
Yes, so they do eat each other. So in the animal kingdom, typically, animals don't really like to eat their friends. And so moray eels, when they're living together in a big pit, they don't eat their friends, which I think we could learn from animals, but fine. Friends, fish are friends, not food. So now the neat thing about that is they have community and relations and friends, and they're not going to eat their buddies. But if a different type of eel goes by, or a different fish goes by that's smaller than them, then they will eat that type of eel. This also happens, it's one of the reasons that mom eels have about 4 million different eggs that they release, because those 4 million eggs will become probably like 2 million larvae. And then those 2 million larvae will be like 1 million elvers. And then those elvers will, like it goes down so far because so many animals eat, you know, little eggs and larvae and this and this. And so a lot of things in the sea will look at things that are not hard to eat. And so those little spotted garden eels, those are easy snacks for bigger moray eels, and same with the elvers or the small eels. So don't eat their friends, they'll eat little guys though.